There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Season 4, Episode 3, Castlemania. This is the episode in which they go to the castle of the two sisters and scare each other a bunch, learn a few things, and it turns out that they find this thing, a journal of the two sisters, which will become a major plot arc going forwards. Now, I actually kind of screwed up a little bit. So I was going to read this alongside the show for the chunk of Season 4 here. But actually this entry, the first entry here, is from the last episode. So forgive me. But we're going to read the first entry now. Then we'll talk about the episode. Then we'll read the last entry, which is actually supposed to be after this episode. So excuse me. This is the first official entry of the Journal of Friendship being entered by Twilight Sparkle. Well, Princess Twilight Sparkle, I should say, and that's really big unexpected change for me. I've been really nervous and feeling so much pressure. The Tree of Harmony had my cutie mark on it, and when we put the elements of harmony back in the tree, it revealed this mysterious chest with 6 keyholes. And I've started searching, but so far I can't find any information about how to open it, or where to find the keys. But I know it's important and vital to helping me discover who I am as a princess. Hopefully, reading the journal of the two sisters will help me be less scared of this whole princess thing. After all, Celestia and Luna became princesses of Equestria and had to tackle really big problems. So if they could do it, then so can I. Right? My friends will also be contributing to the Journal of Friendship, so we can learn from one another. Maybe someday other ponies can read it and learn from our experiences as well. After all, we ponies have some really amazing adventures. Sincerely, Twilight Sparkle. Actually, funny fact, in this episode, as she's perusing the Journal of the Twin Sisters, there's this really brief bit where she actually points to something, and I was going to find it here. Give me just a moment, see if I can. Because she was talking about how the castle was made. Luna was talking about it. Or maybe it was Celestia was talking. One of them was talking about it. There it is. Yeah, this actual entry is in the episode. And in fact, if you're paying attention, that exact artwork is in the episode too. Anywho. So, two things I want to comment on before we actually get forward. And I've noticed this I noticed this in the previous episodes, but it really became apparent in this episode. They're leaning a lot heavier on musical cues and sound effect cues than they had been in the previous episodes, which I'm not sure if I like or not. We're going to have to adjust that going forward, but watching through the show in like one cohesive line like this has really made the contrast jarring. It's just, hey, it's the cartoon thing. I don't know what else to call that. I don't want to call it the Looney Tunes thing, because that's actually a separate thing, but way more musical and audio cues than normal. I'm not sure. Like I said, we'll see what we think of that going forwards. Yeah, Scooby-Doo is a good way to put that. They also, however, do far more extensive usage of backgrounds, too. In fact, one of my favorite bits right towards the beginning is there's an extended shot of the main, the Grand Hall, I suppose. And it follows Fluttershy and Rarity, and then it just pans up to Twilight Sparkle and Spike, and then it pans right back down to Applejack and Rainbow Dash. You know, one shot kind of a deal. And there's actually quite a bit of decent cinematography in this episode in general, which I don't get to comment on enough, because most people think you don't need to do stuff with camera when it comes to cartoons, and those people are wrong. Yeah, I noticed. This is actually his first episode that he's written. Josh Iden or Josh Haber. I have no idea how to pronounce that. I've heard that plenty of times, and it was from you! Anyway, so I like the so I mentioned the increase in animation quality in the last two episodes, but the lighting quality is definitely one thing that's a big change, and this episode shows that off too. They do a lot with the lighting of this episode, which is again one of those underappreciated visual arts that I like to pay attention to, because most people don't even notice it. Good stuff, good stuff. So, Castle of the Twin Sisters. Great, great. Them abandoning the castle makes perfect sense. You know, duh. Why did they leave all the books? Like, them leaving the journal behind makes at least a little bit of sense. You know, Celestia probably didn't want us to look at it anymore. But they left a whole library. And yeah, the books are apparently just fine. What you're probably thinking, well, how else would you do it, lore? Actually, it would have taken very little reconstruction of the episode to make it work. Imagine this. Okay, we're going to go ahead and check out these books. And, like, the few books that remain, and there's not many, are, like, crumbling to dust, barely readable. You know, they can't even read them, and it's like, oh my god, no! And then Spike leans back in the chair after being startled by Angel, and that opens the doorway, and then they find the actual book, which she then reads for the rest of the episode. Basically, one tiny little change would make this whole sequence of events make substantially more sense to me. Anyways. Poor Spike, by the way. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, we've seen the crystal spiders before, haven't we? It's either... I know this comes up because Fluttershy actually mentions the crystal spiders, but I don't remember if it's before here or after here. The star spiders, whatever. I know it comes up, because she specifically points out how they're really friendly and nice and blah, blah, blah. Star Spider, excuse me, Star Spider. Either way, I noticed, I was like, hey, okay, they're cool, they're cool. No worries. It's like Nerubians, they don't bug me. But Spike obviously is not exactly having a good time here. God, I feel so bad for Spike. But, this then leads to a cut shot to Rainbow and Applejack, who are continuing their friendly competing. This goes all the way back to Season 1. I do like the idea that they are still having friendly competition for two big reasons. First of all, it makes absolutely perfect sense for the two of them to be competing still, just in a more friendly fashion. But two, it also showcases something that I personally think is a legitimately good lesson, especially for kids, but for adults too. Friendly competition equals good. Now, I will admit that's an opinion of mine. I can't say that with deciduous fact. But I do think there is good that can come out of friendly competition. The catch is to not let it go too far. To not let it dissolve into things that are much worse than that. But there's nothing wrong with sitting down with my friend and deciding to play video games and see who can beat the game first, right? I mean, you know? We're having a race, something like that. See who can not blink when covered by bees. Yeah, I noticed the bees followed on command weods. Considering that we know that certain animals and bugs can be communicated to if you have the talent for it, like Fluttershy does, I find myself wondering if Mr. Beekeeper's slot, his cutie mark, his place within the pattern, literally allows him to straight up communicate with the bees. You know, so hence all he has to do is be like, I can't whistle, but, you know, I still can't whistle. He whistles, there's a whistle sound effect, and then they're like, oh, okay, two. And yeah, he looked like an earth pony, but I didn't actually check. I suppose I could recheck, but either way. Meanwhile, I like how the bridge from the first episode is still there, by the way. The one Rainbow Dash pulled up. Although it should probably be gone by now. So they cross the bridge. Rarity's like, you don't understand. Retro Ancient Classical is going to be in soon. This is doubly funny because yesterday we were playing through Persona 5 through the Madarame chapter. And so, you know, the pretentiousness of art was already kind of in the back of my mind. I mean, don't mistake me. There's legitimate art and you know, legitimate styles and retreads and rich rocks, but blah, blah, blah. But it's just funny to look at that like, oh, you don't understand. It's vintage. You know, we've got to go restore it. It made me smile. Here's where I mentioned the directing. I feel really bad for Ashley Ball, who I'm probably pronouncing her name wrong, because she has to voice Rainbow Dash and Applejack. And speaking from personal experience, it really sucks talking to yourself when you're doing voice acting. Obviously, by this point, she's had over 3 years of experience at doing it, but still, that's not fun. So credit to her for managing as good of a job as she does. Sliding down. See, I actually don't have a lot of notes for this episode, because most of the episode is fairly... Yeah, exactly, Act. He does a great job of that, too. He somehow distinguishes them, despite the fact that it's always audibly him. He just manages a different tone. It's really good stuff. Anyways. Yeah, no kidding, Shikor. So, I do want to comment on something, because like I said, most of the episode is fairly self-apparent. It's a lighthearted little pseudo-adventure. The stakes are fairly well constructed. The narrative is actually fairly well beat, too. Because what happens is what I like to call staircase narration. So what happens is something escalates, and then we switch to another scene. And then something escalates, and then we switch to another scene. And something escalates, and we switch to another scene. And what happens is, bit by bit, we escalate until everyone kind of connects at the top. And that's the bit where everyone backs up into each other. And then, they all start flying around, and that leads to the tapestry falling on Rarity, which leads to the leaves falling on the rock pile. When then Applejack hits the pillar, which knocks it over on the thing, and she's like, "Oh God, no!" And and then Twilight pulls the freeze spell, which will come up in the future, consequently. It's good construction. I don't have much to say about it specifically, but it is very well designed. In my own rating system, just the way they construct that escalation would get a positive to story, because it's a good job. But I want to mention that... Yeah, I know, right? I want to mention as well, this is an excellent example of how to do an episode that is low stakes / slice of life and still have it be entertaining. How many of you liked this episode? I suppose I should ask that before I say it's an entertaining episode. I liked it. It is plot relevant, ironically, which is exactly the point I'm leading to, actually. Not every episode has to be, and then the world will be destroyed. And not every episode has to be a what I call line continuity, aka one episode leading directly into the next episode. You can do overarching arcs and have plot relevance in an episode that's basically just a slice of life episode. And I mentioned that because that's good. It actually shows the well construction of this in overall arc and the way that the show is going with regards to how they're approaching their storytelling. Hopefully this will be a trend of quality going forwards, knock on wood. Yeah, there was a lot. I'm not actually going to go down the list of Easter eggs. The obvious one is the Castlevania reference, which apparently is intentional. But other than that, I'm not going to go over every single little reference throughout it, although I do want to talk about the Pony of Shadows, but we'll get to that in a minute. But I mentioned this. If you'll forgive me for rambling for just a second. I know you hate it when I ramble. Please forgive me. This is the type of show that I want to make someday. Now, let me clarify that a little bit. I've had a story idea in my head for a long time of what is basically a slice of life show. I guess I could do it as a comic as well. That there's no big stakes, there's no big end of the world plot. Chaos isn't about to, corrupt the ley lines. There's no war looming on the horizon. It's not the devastation of half the population of the Eastern Bloc or whatever. No, it's just I've wanted to do what is effectively just a normal show for a long time, and I've been kind of building it in my head bit by bit. Basically, yeah, Raskor. It would be set in the extant, of course. And that would be kind of the point. It would be in everyday life for people who have access to things like high technology and magic simultaneously, and are of multiple different species, and just kind of following them and their lives and how they function. And it's always comforting to me, because every time I think that, there's a part of my back of my mind, and by a part I mean a gigantic, raging, fire-breathing dragon named Doubt, which constantly tells me that there's no way that would work, and nobody would give a damn. Nobody would invest it. And I like seeing stuff like this show, but also this episode, which helps to remind me why things like that could succeed theoretically, as long as it was well made. So, we'll see. We'll see. That will obviously probably never happen, but I have been taking notes over the years about stuff I would like to introduce. And this is a good example of that. That's why I bring this up. Because there are stakes in this episode. It's just they're extremely low to the ground. Fluttershy's doesn't even have a stake until she enters, and then her stake is finding Angel. Once she finds Angel, she's cool. Rarity's stake is she wants to renovate the tapestries. Obviously, Twilight is just here to look for books. Spike is just here for Twilight. Rainbow Dash and Applejack are here because they're kids. Well, I mean, this is a dare. Let's just call it what it is. So, you know, the stakes are extremely ground level here. Oh yeah, and Pinkie Pie's just having fun, because of course she is. But it still works, and you'll notice that just about everyone's stakes are actually satisfied by the end of the episode. You know, the dares are concluded. She does actually renovate the tapestry. Twilight finds this book, which is exactly what she was looking for. Spike helps out. Pinkie has fun. Fluttershy finds Angel. Everyone's happy. So, it's also probably... I should probably mention something while we're talking about the slice of life thing. There's another episode after this. I don't remember if it's season 4. Let me check the episode list here really quick. I don't think it's season 4. I think it's later. There it is. Season 5, Episode 9. Slice of Life. I didn't realize it was called Slice of Life. That's actually one of my favorite episodes. No joke. But that's also because that was a very well-constructed episode, which is kind of my point in a nutshell. I do firmly believe, yeah, the 100th episode, I do firmly believe that a slice of life thing can work. It's just, you have to be tricky about it. You have to very carefully construct it. Because as was pointed out in chat, a slice of life episode can be really boring. Like, let's say if you were to sit down. All right, let's see. Go through my notes here. I'm gonna have to jot down this part. Put this life here. Put this here. And then we've got Ansem here. These are actually my Kingdom Hearts notes from the lore run from a few years ago. Imagine an episode about that, right? That's dull as crap. It's dishwater. Yeah, exactly right. But there does need to be a stake. It may be a personal stake. It may be a very small scale stake. This is the very premise which most not soap operas. What are they called? What are they called? Like Family Ties, you know. I can't think of the term of the show all of a sudden. Yeah, I like that too. Shadow Machine. A sitcom, thank you. Sitcom. It's the most common thing in a sitcom. Oh no, I need to have a dinner for my boss who's showing up later. Now, that being said, I don't want to say that sitcoms are good, because actually in my experience, most sitcoms are bad. But that's because in my experience, most sitcoms are dishwater, to continue my earlier analogy. They don't bother to try and do quality presentation. They just say, all right, here's the low stake, and go react about it. Actually, that's funny you say that, Darth Tyrant, because that sounds exactly like a quote from... I can't think of any names today. I can think of one of his films. Hitchcock. That sounds like a quote from Hitchcock. It's something along the lines of, you know, what is movie except for life with all the boring bits replaced. Yeah, exactly, Ect. That's exactly the point. I don't know why I'm still talking about this topic. I guess this is just something that's really interesting to me. I've been studying it. I've been studying, I don't know what to call it, normal storytelling for several years now. Because like I said, that is a series I would love to do someday, and I actually want to do. And I've been trying to figure out exactly the specifics that make it work and don't work. And of course, it's also worth noting that even in a slice of life show, having real stakes every now and again is a good thing. I'll actually use a webcomic as an example of that. Anyone ever read questionable content? Or I suppose PvP Online, although that hasn't been true for a while, but that's another example of what I'm talking about. Because most of those are just normal stuff, normal stuff, normal stuff, normal stuff. and then there's this sudden escalation towards a major event, and then there's a major event. Even if the major event is something as relatively simple as a wedding, or two characters finally becoming romantically connected to each other or whatever, there's a substance to it and a build-up to it. It basically it portrays it as your typical, end of the world event, the best of both worlds of an ordinary life kind of an approach. And I've noticed that approach is fairly common amongst the higher quality ones. You'll notice even this very show, My Little Pony, which statistically speaking, most episodes are more or less flavor slice of life kind of episodes. It still has moments where the stakes get real. We actually just had one with Princess Twilight Sparkle. We're going to have another one at the end of this when T-Rex shows up. So it's a fairly common thing. And I think as of Season 4 especially, they start to do that better because Season 4 will actually build up to the T-Rex thing, as opposed to, and all of a sudden T-Rex there. So that's a nice little touch as well. But anyways, I'm getting it way off topic. Let's go ahead and get back to the episode. I mentioned one. I don't want to talk about all the gags, but there's two gags that stick out in my mind, and I don't even know why. I think it's just the timing. Comedic timing is usually funnier to me personally than the joke itself, if that makes any kind of sense. One of them is Rarity. What Fluttershy? What are you doing here? She's with me. I don't know why that's so funny. But the way she says that, as usual, Tabitha St. Germain is a national treasure. But the other joke that really got me is, and then someone flips, and then someone flips, and then carrots flip up right in front of Angel, who's just like, oh, cool. What? And then, Rarity ends up outside, and she's like, no! And I guess the second one involves Rarity, too, as well. Because she's screaming because she tore a bit of the fabric. That amused me tremendously. Where did I get the carrots from? I just wanted to repair your arm. She's amazing. Anyways. So, of course, the Pony of Shadows ends up being Pinkie Pie. I mean, duh, really. It was actually pretty obvious. Because she just kind of vanishes out and then comes back in. That's a good point, I didn't even think about that. So, two things before we wrap up this episode. The stated Aesop is actually not a bad one, but more for kids than anything else. Which is funny, but I'll get to that in a second. Don't let letting your imagination run wild is easier to deal with if you happen to have a friend to help cope with that. And that is actually an important thing because, I mean, I don't know about you, but I and several other children I could mention, back when I was a kid and ones I've observed since then, tend to have a problem with letting the imagination just go, whoo! And it's an escalation thing, right? You get stuck in a loop. And the most common outcome of that is fear. Yeah, the monster under the bed thing, that's exactly right. And I've seen that a lot. And one of the best ways to deal with that is to have someone there who's got your back, so to speak, because that makes you feel less alone and less ostracized. And there's someone else to be like, to bounce those ideas off to where it sounds silly, and it helps to bring that down, de-escalate things. So that's a good lesson. But the reason I say that's more applicable to kids is because the second lesson is actually almost universally applicable to adults. And I'd like to think that's on purpose, because the second lesson, this is a direct quote here, knowing about the past made it easier to deal with my problems in the present, even the scary ones. Now, I think that's a good lesson right there. Obviously, I am a bit biased. I am a huge history geek. I have been since I was very young. But the idea of learning and knowing why things happened and how things happened helps us to deal with the now. I mean, I think that's applicable even on a microscopic scale. Never mind looking at world events. I think that's especially true right now, given what's happening in real life. So we have our second season arc, which has started, which I already mentioned. It's this thing. They're going to start keeping a journal, the Journal of Friendship, which history doesn't repeat, but it tends to rhyme. Patterns. You could trace patterns in history from right now back to, I'd say, at least the Franco-Prussian War. I'd say that's a pretty big turning point for a lot of what we have right now. Anyways, the Friendship Journal, which is a great idea. I kind of wish I had people I could, keep eternal with, and just for the hell of it. Yeah, so they write starting with... I wish they had kept doing the journal. I get the idea of trying to do a different season arc every season, but the journal was a great story arc thing. Here's Applejack's entry, consequently. Dear Diary, I'm mighty glad Granny Smith's legend about the shadow ponies wasn't true. Because I'll admit it right here and right now, I was so scared that if I'd seen or heard one more spooky thing, I would have taken off like a jackrabbit. And Rainbow Dash would have won most daring pony. But like Twilight said, it's good to know whenever your imagination is getting away from you, a good friend can help you rein it in. Unfortunately, that's actually it for this one. These are relatively small entries. Next one's going to be for the next episode. I don't actually have much else to say about the journal right now because I want to save those thoughts for when it really comes together, if that's okay. Because I like the idea of the Friendship Journal. I really like what they do with it going forward. So let's just cut that off there. How to rate this episode? What do you guys think? I think it's at least above average. Hold on. Excuse me. Whoops. That's the wrong button. Sorry, I'm still suffering from allergy pollens. Allergy pollens? Pollergens? Yeah, I'm thinking at least orange. I'm just debating between orange and red. This isn't a purple episode. I think I'm going to push it up to red. I think the presentation helps elevate it a bit. I think I'm going to stick with that. Which means Josh Haber's first episode is a red episode, so that's good. I think he's the only... Yeah, he's the only one who has that. M.A. Larson's first episode was green. Amy Keating Rogers' first episode was green. Cindy Morrow's was yellow. Charlotte Fullerton's was orange. Mary Mother Williams was yellow. Dave Polsky was yellow. Megan McCarthy was green. Lauren Faust was yellow. Chris Savino was orange, and Corey Powell was orange. No, it's exactly like the colors I use on the website. Blue, green, yellow, orange, red, purple. It's the exact same color scheme. Put that there. So, without further ado, our next episode... Let's go ahead and do this. What is our next episode? Next episode is Daring Don't. Right. So Daring Do is going to show up. So I will be back in about 25 minutes to discuss Daring Do.